Constable McCartys' Investigations by Henry Lawson. Read for LibriVox.org by Son of the Exiles. Constable McCartys' Investigations. Most unpleasantly adjacent to the haunts of lower orders stood a terrace in the city when the current year began, and a notice indicated there were vacancies for boarders in the middle house and lodgings for a single gentleman. Now a singular observer could have seen but few attractions, whether in the house or missus, or the notice, or the street, but at last there came a lodger whose appearances and actions puzzled Constable McCarty, the policeman on the beat. He, the single gent, was wasted almost to emaciation, and his features were the palest that McCarty ever saw, and these indications, pointing to a past of dissipation, greatly strengthened the suspicions of the agent of the law. He, the lodger, hang the pronoun, seemed to like the stormy weather, when the elements in battle kept it up a little late. Yet he'd wander in the moonlight when the stars were close together, taking ghostly consolation in a visionary state. He would walk the streets at midnight when the Storm King raised his banner, walk without his old umbrella, wave his arms above his head, or he'd fold them tight and mutter in a wild disjointed manner, while the town was wrapped in slumber and he should have been in bed. Said the constable on duty, "Sure, I wonder what his trade is," and the constable would watch him from the shadow of a wall. But he never picked a pocket, and he ne'er accosted ladies, and the constable was puzzled what to make of him at all. Now McCarty had arrested more than one notorious dodger. He had heard of men afflicted with the strangest kind of fads, but he couldn't fix the station or the business of the lodger, who at times would chum with cadgers and at other times with cads. And the constable would often stand and wonder how the gory Sheol the stranger got his living, for he loafed the time away, and he often sought a hillock when the sun went down in glory, just as if he was a mourner at the burial of the day. Mac had noticed that the lodger did a mighty lot of smoking, and could stow away a long 'un, never winking so he could, and McCarty once at midnight came upon the lodger poking round about suspicious alleys where the common houses stood. Yet the constable had seen him in a class above suspicion, seen him welcomed with effusion by a dozen Tony gents, seen him driving in a buggy of a rising politician through the gateway of the member's Tony private residence. And the constable off duty had observed the lodger slipping down a lane to where the river opened on the ocean wide, where he'd stand for hours gazing at the distant anchored shipping, but he never took his coat off, so it wasn't suicide. For the constable had noticed that a man who's filled with loathing for his selfish fellow creatures and the evil things that be, will for some mysterious reason shed a portion of his clothing ere he takes his first and final plunge into eternity. And McCarty once at midnight, be it said to his abasement, left his beat and climbed a railing of considerable height, just to watch the lodger's shadow on the curtain of his casement, while the little room was lighted in the listening hours of night. Now at first the shadow hinted that the substance sat inditing, now it indicated toothache or the headache, and again 'twould exaggerate the gestures of a dipsomaniac fighting those original conceptions of a whisky-sodden brain. Then the constable, retreating, scratched his head and muttered sorra, "One o' me can understand it, but I'll keep me eye on him. Divil take him and his tantrums, he's a lunatic begorra, or if he was up to mischief he'd be sure to douse the glim." But McCarty wasn't easy, for he had a vague suspicion that a scam was being plotted, and he thought the matter down, till his mind was pretty certain that the business was sedition, and the man, in league with others, sought to overthrow the crown. But in spite of observation Mac received no information, and was forced to stay inactive, being puzzled for a charge. That the lodger was a madman seemed the only explanation, though the house would scarcely harbour such a lunatic at large. His appearance failed to warrant apprehension as a vagrant, though 'twas getting very shabby, as the constable could see. But McCarty in the meantime hoped to catch him in a flagrant breach of peace, or the intention to commit a felony. For digression there is leisure, and it is the writer's pleasure just to pause a while and ponder on a painful legal fact, being forced to say in sorrow and a line of doubtful measure that there's nothing so elastic as the cruel Vagrant Act. But McCarty knew his duty and was brave as any lion, but he dreaded being landed in an influential bog, as the chances were he would be if the man he had his eye on was a person of importance who was travelling incog. Want of sleep and over-worry seemed to tell upon McCarty. He was thirsty more than ever, but his appetite resigned. He was previously reckoned as a jolly chap and hearty, but the mystery was lying like a mountain on his mind. Though he tried his best he couldn't get a hold upon the lodger, for the latter's antecedents weren't known to the police. They considered that the devil was a dark and artful dodger who was scheming under cover for the downfall of the peace. 'Twas a simple explanation, though McCarty didn't know it, which with half his penetration he might easily have seen, for the object of his dangerous suspicions was a poet who was not so widely famous as he thought he should have been. And the constable grew thinner till one morning, little dreaming of the sword of revelation that was leaping from its sheath, he alighted on some verses in the columns of the Freeman, with the Christian name and surname of the lodger underneath. Now McCarty and the poet are as brother is to brother, or at least as brothers should be, and they very often meet on the lonely block at midnight, and they wink at one another, disappearing down the byway of a shanty in the street. And the poet's name you're asking? Well, the ground is very tender. You must wait until the public put the guilt upon the name, till a glorious sorrow drowning and perhaps a final bender heralds his triumphant entrance to the thunder halls of fame. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.